Jesus, 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 Jesus.
Kanye West has just dropped a gospel album called Jesus is King, has proclaimed that he got radically saved, is now a real Christian, and will now only make Christian music, and all of his music prior to this album was the devil's music. Now, I've always been a fan of Kanye's music, so this news of this transition was a big deal to me. But I'm also a Christian, so this news is an even bigger deal to me. But I'm also a Christian who used to be in the conservative evangelical Christian world, which seems to potentially be a new sunken place that Kanye has fallen into, and so that makes it an even bigger deal for me. So we have to talk about the complicated chain of events that led to the creation of this album, and its cultural impact on the Christian world, the creative world, and even the political world. Literally no one on the internet has this deep of an analysis of this whole event. So strap in, we're going to give you all the juicy details, and make sure you watch to the end to get the full larger picture. If you don't make it that far, like and subscribe now for my other videos on Christianity and leftist politics. Okay, let's do this.
Jesus is a friend of mine. Jesus is my friend. Jesus is a friend of mine. I have a friend in Jesus.
Now, first of all, I'm so sick and tired of people who disagree with the stuff that Kanye says in interviews so much that they end up saying some ridiculous stuff like Kanye's music was never even that good or whatever. I too disagree with everything Kanye has ever said about politics, and you can critique Kanye all you want. But don't lie on the man's name, people. No matter your opinion on dude, Kanye West is the most influential artist of this generation, no doubt. And I could make a super long video just on that simply because of how influential hip-hop has been on my life. And if you think I'm incorrect, chances are very high that the people you would put above Kanye based on your perspective wouldn't sound the way they do without Kanye West's influence on the culture. Now, as for Kanye's attitude problem that he's always had, let's break that down real quick. I think the reason Kanye's famous painfully huge ego even formed is because since the beginning of his career, he's always taken huge creative risks with every project. And every step of the way, people around him and critical voices in the world said, don't do it, it's a bad idea, it won't bring you success, only for it to then prove to be great ideas and bring him tons of success. Multiple times, Kanye would put out an album to meet polarizing mixed reviews, only for the radio to sound just like that album 2 years later. It makes sense that a huge ego and even a stubborn hard heart that doesn't want to listen to anybody would form when that pattern happens over and over. That's why his lyric, "I don't take advice from people less successful than me," makes a lot of sense. Imagine how silly it can look to him for all these people who are less successful telling him, don't do this, it's a bad move, only to see them be wrong every single time. I remember an interview from when Kanye was promoting the Yeezus album, which is peak egotistical Kanye era.
And it's hilarious to me. I only listen to people who are younger than me. These are the only people with ideas.
He was obviously being hyperbolic when he said that, but the spirit of that statement makes a lot of sense when someone like him has reached that level of success. And by the way, we're only talking about creative ideas here that people have tried to stop him from and then him proving them wrong. And I'm only saying all this to start off this whole thing to make the point that Kanye has no one to relate to. No one has been on this path that he's on before him. The path of creativity and success that he's on is so utterly unique that it has to constantly be improvised because he has no examples to follow. That's why he always used to compare himself to people like Picasso and Walt Disney and Steve Jobs and Andy Warhol. These people were also on paths of creativity so unique that they couldn't relate to anyone. Kanye has fully embraced his individuality and admires others who also embrace their individuality, which is the only reason Kanye is a Trump supporter and why he wore that MAGA hat all of last year.
If you do drugs and you think you're cool, you need to come to Sunday school.
If you were to ask his opinions on policies, he would lean Democrat on all of them, not Republican. But Kanye loves Trump as the Donald, the great performance artist. And maybe some of us may also feel the same way about Trump if Trump didn't actually hold a position of power or prestige in society. But since he does, we can't see what Kanye sees. It's kind of like the people who say that they like Trump just because he's funny to laugh at. It's like, yeah, sure, but we aren't able to find any of this stuff funny until he's actually out of office. So Kanye's recent conservative leanings, mainly just in 2018, was purely art, aesthetics, and individuality for him, and nothing else. That was most clear to see in October of 2018 when Kanye chose to distance himself from all these conservative public figures. He wrote on his Twitter, "My eyes are now wide open and now realize I've been used to spread messages I don't believe in. I am distancing myself from politics and completely focusing on being creative." When I first read that tweet on that day, I thought, awesome, Kanye's finally waking up a bit. But then I found out that the reason for that tweet wasn't because he finally realized the error of these ideologies of these conservatives, or that he realized how this group of people has hurt so many people of color, or any of that. Candace Owens posted a shirt design for her Blexit project, the whole black exit from the Democratic Party thing, and she said that Kanye was responsible for the design. And not only was Kanye not responsible for the design, but he was also very insulted and offended that she would try to pass off this whack shirt design as his, the founder and creative director of Yeezy. He tweeted, "I introduced Candace to the person who made the logo, and they didn't want their name on it, so she used mine. I never wanted any association with Blexit. I have nothing to do with it." That's why Kanye distanced himself from politics at the end of last year.
Jesus is my best friend, my best friend.
Now, no matter how you feel about Kanye, and if you think he deserved all the public backlash for his support of Trump and his ignorant, racist comments, if you think he deserved it or not, the backlash was still traumatizing. It activated his bipolar disorder as he suffered through manic episodes. He was hospitalized, he got on some medication, and that medication ended up making him gain a lot of weight, which resulted in celebrity gossip blogs fat-shaming him, which just drove him further into depression and mania, and he got liposuction. Then he got some medication that actually did help and didn't make him gain weight, but he felt like he had just lost so much at that point. On June 1st, 2018, he released a 7-track album called Yay, and then a week later, he released a 7-track collaborative album with Kid Cudi called Kids See Ghosts. And I actually liked those projects, but they clearly were not as well produced and thought out as all of his previous projects that fans grew to love him for. Then on August 30th, he randomly released this unfinished single called Ecstasy, and this was an example of raunchy lyrical Kanye, which we've all heard before, but this time, it was a new layer of deeper and darker raunchy. The single's cover art was a rendition of this Instagram photo of Kim Kardashian with her sisters, and the song opens up with these lyrics.
You got sick thoughts, I got more of them. You got a sister-in-law, you a smash, I got 4 of them.
And even the diehard Kanye fans were a little concerned.
Smash, I got 4 of them.
Damn. Hold on, wait. That's kind of shaky, though, right?
Whitney, if I said that I would like smash your family members, what would you say about that?
I'd be a little disturbed.
Yeah. Like, that's who says that? There's something wrong with this man.
And a big reason fans always loved Kanye is because he's always been super transparent in his lyrics and has always exposed the deep, darker parts of himself. But this time around, it felt like we're listening to something that we never should have been allowed to hear.
Those is your sisters. You did something unholy to them pictures.
And so the fans weren't really feeling the direction he was going down.
Yeah, how you feeling about this?
It's pretty cool.
Then on September 7th of 2018, Kanye released a single and music video with Lil Pump called I Love It, which was some more raunchy, gross Kanye.
I love it. I can't deal with this shit. Kanye, you used to be one of my favorite, bro. You don't do nothing but sell Yeezys now, bro. What's up with the music?
And he premiered it at the Pornhub Awards, which he was supposed to creatively direct, but apparently it was a huge technical disaster, and he only showed up like halfway through, took some photos, and disappeared. He then announced he was releasing an album called Yandhi on September 29th, 2018, and from the cover art and leaked snippets, it looked like it was going to be a follow-up to his 2013 album Yeezus, and fans were excited. He was also scheduled to perform on SNL the same night, but September 29th came and went And Yandhi did not drop. And then on SNL, he gave one of his cringiest performances ever, performing I Love It. And then he ended the show by giving this rant about the individuality he's expressing through wearing the MAGA hat, only for the broadcast to be cut off like halfway through, or more like a fourth way through. Kanye then postponed Yandhi's release date to November to record in Uganda, but then November came and went and we still got nothing. Also, Kanye had beef with his fellow superstar rapper Drake, all rooted in a misunderstanding because Drake thought that secrets he told Kanye told Pusha T, because Pusha T put those secrets in a diss track when in reality it came from someone else. I know this is now starting to sound like this channel is becoming a tea-spilling drama channel, but trust me, all of this leads up to the Kanye that puts out Jesus is King. Just stay with me. I'm trying to say that 2018 was clearly a downward spiral for Kanye.
We're doing a new thing through Jesus Christ. Doing a new thing.
Then on January 6th, the first Sunday of 2019, Kanye gathered a choir that he called the Samples just to sing inspirational songs for him in order to heal his soul. No other purpose than that. And as they were singing these inspirational songs, they eventually started singing gospel songs, because what's more inspirational than gospel? Then they kept meeting up every Sunday and called the gathering Sunday service, and eventually they started to open it up to the public in Calabasas, and people were very interested in Kanye's New Direction. Then Kanye and the Sunday Service Choir got to perform at Coachella on Easter morning, April 21st, and somewhere around this time, perhaps on this day or the first week of May even, Kanye West says he got radically saved.
Blessed be the peacemaker's word to the meek. The kingdom of heaven is open all week. Jesus and...
He hasn't publicly talked about what that exact moment looked like, but it was very significant, and he started to read his Bible again. Then he starts asking the people around him about God and Christianity. One of the guys that interacted with Kanye often through working with Adidas and was also married to a woman who was a nanny for Kanye and Kim for a while, happened to attend this little church in Santa Clarita called Placerita Bible Church, a small, Baptist, mostly white congregation pastored by Adam Tyson. And this man starts telling his pastor Adam at Bible studies that he works with Kanye West, and Kanye keeps asking him questions about God, and he doesn't know how to answer them all the time. Adam Tyson had apparently never heard of Kanye West, and he tells him, just answer him from the Bible. And he said, I do, but sometimes he asks me questions that I can't answer. So can we just pray for him? And then one of the guys said, you should invite him to church. And they all laughed because they couldn't imagine someone like Kanye West showing up to their little church. But then he did invite Kanye to church, and he did show up on Sunday, May 19th, and he showed up in the back and then snuck out early before it ended. But he did hear Adam Tyson preach that morning from the Gospel of John, talking about when Peter says to Jesus that he will never deny him, only for him to then later deny him 3 times while Jesus is being tortured and executed. And he used that passage as a way of talking about how we can't be so presumptuous about our future and the way we'll react to it, and we have to put our trust in God's plan. According to Adam Tyson's retelling of events, he didn't even notice Kanye was there, and the people that had been praying for Kanye were excited to spot Kanye in the back, but Adam thought that this was just a one-time thing. Then, next week, he shows up again, then slips out early once again. And at this point, Adam Tyson's thinking, something must be happening within Kanye, because nobody shows up to my church twice unless they actually want to hear the Bible being preached. Then, 3rd week, no show. But then 4th week, he comes again, but this time he stays after to talk to this pastor, Adam Tyson.
He stands at the back of the church. He wants to talk to the pastor. And so I'm like, hey man, my name's Adam. What's your name? He's like, my name's Kanye. I'm like, hey bro, it's great to meet you. I heard that you've been visiting some. I haven't seen you. I'm glad that you hung out today so we could talk. He said, Pastor, I got to talk to you for a minute. I'm like, yeah, man, what's up? He said, about 5 weeks ago, I got radically saved. And I'm like, hey man, what does that mean? What do you mean you got radically saved? And he just started telling me a little bit of his testimony. And, it basically went something like he was raised knowing that God existed. He was told about Christ, that his dad was a Christian counselor, that he had been in church, and then he'd been running from God, and he made it big in the industry and as a African-American rapper and just all the popularity and all the fame. He just started chasing all the things of this world. But he said that basically he just felt so a weight of sin, and the guilt of sin brought him down low. And he would say, the devil basically just brought him to a place where he just felt like he was in bondage to his sin. And so he said, I got delivered. So when you hear stuff like that, you want to verify that. So I'm like, hey, man, I'd like to talk to you. What do you mean about that? And so he had to go. He said, hey, man, I'm going to go do Sunday service that Sunday afternoon in Calabasas, which is a suburb of L.A. At the time, they were doing a Sunday service just for his family and some close friends. And I didn't really even know what he was talking about. But we scheduled an appointment. And so a couple of weeks later, he came in for like 3 hours. And so at that particular meeting is when I had a little bit better confidence in at least seeing God at work in him as I just talked about all these doctrines we're talking about right now.
So Kanye develops this relationship with Adam Tyson and eventually tries to convince him to preach at the Sunday service events. And initially, Adam was very opposed to it because he was afraid of ruining what Kanye was doing. Kanye wanted him to preach for an hour at these things, and Adam eventually agreed to do it, but he said he would do 10 to 15 minutes because he was way more aware than Kanye in this situation and knew that people were showing up to see Kanye and the choir perform, not to see him preach.
But I'm here to tell you today that the Bible says that God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. God's love for you never flounders. It never vacillates. It never wavers. It never hesitates.
So I want to make clear for those who have been wondering about this guy, Kanye pushed him into the spotlight. And Adam was initially hesitant because he was totally fine doing the private Bible studies and didn't want to step in on what Kanye was doing. So he's not using Kanye for clout or followers or money. And this is a very different relationship that Kanye has had with this pastor because Kanye has been friends with pastors that were very different than Adam Tyson. I'm talking about people like Carl Lentz, who pastors Hillsong, New York, and Rich Wilkerson Jr., who actually married Kim and Kanye and who pastors VOO Church in Miami. And these are two of the, what I would call the four horsemen of white evangelicalism who run Hollywood Christianity, along with Chad Veach and Judah Smith, with Justin Bieber at the center of it all. And these gentlemen are Pentecostal celebrity preachers who were basically given their churches and who just really do motivational speeches with a Bible verse thrown in at the beginning. These are basically the millennial versions of Joel Osteen. Hopefully we don't get the Zoomer versions. And the worst part about them, in my opinion, is that they keep their mouth shut when it comes to justice issues, and they are intentionally unclear about their policies concerning the affirmation of LGBTQ people. And when they're asked these kinds of questions, they either avoid it or give these annoying, lofty speeches about how, I don't like making blanket statements, or I'm affirming of people, and Jesus loves and welcomes everyone, and so do we. And sometimes the mask comes slightly off and they say things like what Carl Lentz said, that yeah, homosexuality is a sin, but all sinners are welcome at our church. Now, Adam Tyson's church policies are also unaffirming of LGBTQ people, but they're clear about it. Now, when Jesus is King dropped, I initially thought that the new influence on Kanye's life was coming from these four horsemen of white evangelicalism and that their agenda was the reason for all of this. But no, because these guys aren't actual pastors who walk with people on their spiritual journey. They're just preachers. And on top of that, they don't want to change Kanye because they benefit from being friends with Kanye and other celebrities. And so they put way less of a burden on their celebrity friends than they do on their congregations. And Adam Tyson is a real pastor of a small congregation who was willing to walk with Kanye through this and willing to encourage him to change. We're going to talk a little bit about what that change is looking like later in the video, but first of all, this led to Kanye West dropping this gospel album, Jesus is King. And once again, Kanye fans were excited for it, even though they were pretty discouraged that they weren't ever going to see the highly anticipated Yandhi album. But when the album dropped, They weren't feeling it. Hardly anyone was feeling it. Kanye fans weren't feeling it. Hip-hop fans weren't feeling it. Even gospel fans were not feeling it.
Man, I'm all for the message, the positivity, 100%. But could that have hindered some sort of full-on musical capabilities which he's fully grasped?
I think that it could have really benefited a lot more with just a little more thought, a little more experimentation.
Maybe it's going to be impactful, you know, for society. But sonically, this album isn't impactful as it was for the last albums. That even goes for albums like Yeezus.
But come on, man. Closed on Sunday, You're My Chick-fil-A, #1 with the lemonade. Are you kidding me? I'm feeling a strong 4 to a light 5.
Because not only has Kanye decided to bog it down in religious overtones going about as deep as an infant's belly button, but the fact that this album is a vague explanation of Ye's relationship with God make it come off less like he's prepping for prayer and more like he's running late for church.
That's it right there. I love that line from Sean C. Sounds like he's running late for church. And this whole thing is just weak lyrics, mediocre production, and each track just sounds like an unfinished rough draft with each song just cutting off at the end. And there have been some people who love this album, like the Kanye stans who would never ever say anything negative about Kanye.
Kanye fans really Kanye fans just really get on your nerves.
You want to listen to some of them?
They so uplifting when it's Kanye. But if you try to make the same case for another artist and how another artist
is show me that other artist is college dropout. Show me that other artist is late registration.
We just talking about
show me that other artist is My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, you what you not about to do is
we talking about
you not about to you not about to compare
about the album by itself.
This album by itself was great.
And on top of that, the reason I initially wanted to make this video before I realized it was going to be this whole complicated rabbit hole that we're in right now is because I saw a bunch of white evangelical leaders also praising this album.
My crew is big and it keeps getting bigger. That's because Jesus Christ is my...
The first week this album dropped was a highly triggering week for us ex-evangelicals online because we saw a bunch of posts like this. This viral post saying, "Hey Christians, what if we are witnessing a modern day Saul to Paul kind of transformation in front of our eyes? From I am a God to Jesus is King, from making millions to making disciples, from Yeezus to Jesus. What if God is reminding us how radical his grace is? What if God is calling the church to a new day of revival and radical evangelism? What if truly the radically rescued rescue radically?" So we ex-evangelicals saw a whole bunch of posts like this from some of our old evangelical friends. And the reason it's so triggering is because the same people that say Kanye is a Christian because he says he's a Christian, and we can't doubt that, also spent 8 years doubting Obama was a Christian even though he said he was. And the same people who are saying that Kanye is a real Christian with a real relationship with God are the same people who say that LGBTQ Christians aren't real Christians and have a real relationship with God because of who they are. And the same people who say that this album is a sign that God could use anybody to preach the gospel are the same people who say that God can't use women to preach the gospel. And if they're not saying that, then they're saying that God can't use LGBTQ people to preach the gospel. And the same old evangelical friends of mine who were posting about how cool this album is and how cool that Kanye is pointing people to Jesus despite his flaws are the same people who refuse to associate with me because I am a heretic that they personally know instead of a famous celebrity who just has some flaws. So that really sucked to see. And it's clear that these particular white evangelical leaders are just using this story to push their agenda. Because they love a good testimony that they could put on a platform and use as hyper-individualistic propaganda to manipulate people into thinking that Jesus takes away all your problems if you just live this way, a part of this church. Just look at the Jesus Christ poppin' lock dancer guy who was a bit of a meme earlier this year.
Jesus Christ! So put on! The armor of God! Jesus Christ! We love you, God! So we do it for God!
Now I love this guy, but here he is performing at a mostly white church for the pastor to use him as a prop to preach his message.
Shoes of peace! Stop it on the enemy! We love you, God! Jesus Christ! Jesus Christ, we love you, God!
Here's the deal. The reason he shouts Jesus Christ it's almost as he is tormenting the devil for the years that he... Because when you say the name of Jesus, demons tremble. They start trembling. Come on, somebody want to make the devil nervous today. You shout Jesus Christ.
These particular white evangelical leaders are using Kanye the same way. Even extreme far-right content creators are using Kanye's album this way too, as a prop to win the culture war, blasting the album and framing a narrative that the only people who hate this album are the Christian-hating, sensitive snowflake liberals, and actually this album is great.
But I thought that the plane was going to go down because I had a lesbian couple behind me arguing about their love life. You had some very over-affectionate gay couple to the right side in the right row. Basically what I did was just blast Jesus is King in my ear 4 times in a row.
Oh, and here's a clip of literal Nazi, paleo-conservative Nick Fuentes celebrating and jamming out to the song Follow God after he sent a bunch of trolls to a Charlie Kirk Q&A to challenge his support of Israel, but it's because, like, Jews are conspiring against us or stuff like that.
Night. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Listen to his voice, yeah.
Never felt so loved.
Yep. Yeah, we did it. Yeah, you could say mission accomplished.
Life like this is what your life like. Try to live the life right.
Bro, we did it. We've defeated Charlie Kirk.
So many people are using Kanye as a prop to push their own narrative and agendas. But the thing is, the lyrics and the interviews around this album, Kanye's made them so vague that it makes it really easy for people to just interpret everything he says their own way and claim that Kanye is pushing their narrative and agenda forward. And I think Kanye is completely clueless to all of it, and he's only able to see what's directly in front of him. So people, be very skeptical of this conversion narrative that people are pushing around this album. But let's finally answer this question that I know a lot of people out there have had during all this. Wasn't Kanye already a Christian?
I want Jesus.
One of Kanye's first big hits was Jesus Walks in 2004, and he's always said ever since then in his music and in interviews that he's a Christian. So why is he saying he suddenly became a Christian now? I have a friend who's been on a similar journey and spiritual exploration as I have coming out of evangelicalism, and she was never really that familiar with Kanye, but when she heard this story, she was initially very confused, thinking, how can this public secular figure go into conservative, purity-obsessed Christianity looking like a huge step backwards? Because within our particular friend group, we're used to meeting and talking to people who grew up in evangelicalism and then started exploring and deconstructing and learning a lot, whether it's in philosophy or science or even Christian history, and even realizing that a lot of the stuff that Christians told them Christians have always believed is only like a couple hundred years old. And then they leave that conservative Christian environment so that they can be more honest about their new convictions. And that could be going into more of a secular humanist environment or even into a progressive Christian or leftist Christian environment. And I talk about this group of people a lot on my channel. And Kanye also grew up in a conservative Christian church environment and then distanced himself from it when he was a teenager and a young adult. But Kanye stepping away from it was not this honest deconstruction and spiritual exploration that I just described. There's another popular reason people leave their churches, and it's simply because they just want to live their lives free from this environment that's constantly policing their behavior and trying to keep them accountable for everything they do. And so they leave and go do whatever they want. And it usually looks like finally drinking, smoking, partying, sleeping around, doing the stuff that they felt like they were always sheltered from in the church. But a lot of these individuals still believe that the stuff that was taught to them growing up is still the correct worldview. But they just plan on living their life how they want for now, and then coming back to conservative Christianity when they're older, either when they settle down and start a family, or when they're really old and are about to die, so that they can repent of all their sins just in time to make it into heaven. Because even though they no longer associate with Christianity, they still believe that there is an angry God watching their every move, keeping a list like Santa Claus, waiting for them to come back to their mom's church and hoping they repent in time so they don't burn forever in hell. That's why we've all met people who never act like they're involved in any sort of religion, but then out of nowhere they say something that implies they believe all that stuff. It's also why all these celebrities thank God at award shows. Now, the reason I've never really talked about this group of people on this channel before is because I'm sick and tired of people thinking that those of us who leave conservative Christianity because of honest exploration and convictions are really just those people who just reject God and still believe all that stuff and will come back later. That's why people like me hate it when our old evangelical friends say some ignorant stuff like, "I know you still know the truth, and I'm praying that you'll return." Because the reason we left is because we were after the truth once we realized that it wasn't there. Now, Kanye is part of this other group. He stepped away for a while to live how he wanted, but he still believed it was the correct worldview, and so he still mentioned Christian stuff in his music and interviews every now and then, because he knew eventually he would come back to it later in life, after he lived it up for a while.
I wanna talk to God, but I'm afraid cause we ain't spoken so long. Got a Bible by my bed, oh yes, I'm very Christian. Constantly repenting cause yes, I never listen.
Now this is a kind of mind prison, because it postpones all spiritual exploration until later in life, thus retaining a childish spirituality and refusing to budge on it because they're going to continue that journey later. So when a conservative Christian comes along and talks to them, they say, yeah, I already believe all that stuff, and I know I need to go back to church, and I will eventually. And when an atheist comes and talks to them, they say, I believe in God, and I'm a Christian, but they actually have no way of backing up those reasons because they actually don't engage in any sort of spiritual exploration, and they haven't since they were younger. And when a progressive Christian comes to talk to them, they say, yeah, that all sounds nice, but I know you're just twisting scriptures to make it easier for you. I don't really know scriptures myself, but I know that's what you're doing, and I know it's all true the way it was told to me growing up, and I know if I don't repent in time, I'm going to burn in hell forever. That's another thing these people say a lot. We've all had friends who you never thought were Christians, and then out of nowhere they tell you that they're afraid of going to hell. It's really sad, and it's really difficult to figure out good, responsible ways to get through to people like this, and I'm barely trying to figure that out for myself. But what also makes me really sad is the reason progressive Christianity doesn't look that realistic to some of these people is because progressive Christianity isn't as popular as conservative Christianity right now. There are definitely a lot of progressive Christians out there, but you usually find progressive Christianity being taught in mainline Protestant churches, which usually consist of small congregations of old white people, and they're not interested in growing their congregations, and so they barely have any sort of online presence. And therefore, there's a lot of you out there who don't know that there are progressive Christian churches in your area. I wish there were more avenues of healthy spiritual exploration in place for people like this and for people like Kanye, because when he came back around and had questions about God, he ended up at this church led by Adam Tyson, who's a Calvinist.
Jesus, take the wheel, take it from us.
For those that don't know what Calvinism is, John Calvin developed plenty of theological doctrines for Protestants after the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s. And then after Calvin died, a lot of followers of the Protestant theologian Jacob Arminius started teaching that salvation occurred out of the free will choice of humans responding to God's call. And that call can even be rejected later in life, and you could even lose your salvation because you can choose to lose it. This led to what we call Arminianism, which most people just sum up in believing in free will. And the followers of John Calvin, who believed very strongly in God's predestination, rejected all this and developed the 5 points of Calvinism, also known as the acronym TULIP. The first point is total depravity. All humans exist in a fallen state of original sin, and we are all totally depraved. The next point is unconditional election. Of all these fallen, depraved humans, God chooses to elect a certain group of these humans, almost randomly and completely unconditionally. They didn't do anything to deserve God choosing them specifically. Next point is limited atonement. So Jesus Christ's death on the cross atoned for the sins of not all of humanity, but just for the sins of the chosen. Atonement is limited to them. Next point is irresistible grace. When God chooses to reveal himself to the chosen through his grace, that experience of grace is absolutely irresistible. You cannot resist it. You will become a Christian because you are one of the chosen elected. And last point is perseverance of saints. So the saints, the chosen, the elected, they will be preserved by God, and they cannot lose their salvation no matter what they do. Now, this is all pretty great news for the chosen Christians, but disgustingly awful news for everyone else. And the fate of everyone else who are predestined to burn forever in hell beyond any choice of their own because they weren't chosen by God paints a very evil God, in my opinion. And Adam Tyson was interviewed by some fellow Calvinists, and one of them asked him, does Kanye believe in these doctrines? And this is what he said.
Would you say that Kanye is holding to the doctrines of grace?
I don't think that he would know what those are at this moment.
Not yet.
I mean, we talk about like more of the solas than the Reformed doctrines of grace than tulip. So I have not spelled out tulip for him, and just walked him through that. I mean, I'll say things here and there like, hey, man, God chose you. So it's just kind of being faithful to Scripture and not just tackling that right away. I don't know how he would respond. I'm not against doing that. I'm sure at some point we're going to have to get into that. And I have to act like it's a burden. It's a joy to talk about those doctrines with anybody because I believe they're biblical and they free us into seeing the beauty of God's sovereign grace.
That's right.
So I have no shame in it, but we just haven't gotten to that particular topic because we've just talked so much about sanctification, and we've talked so much about philosophy of ministry of what is the Sunday service, what can God, what is this album, Jesus is King? What does he want to do for God?
So through all this research, I've come to the conclusion that Kanye West's recent conversion and his desire to spread the gospel now is genuine. I know some people out there have felt like maybe it's not genuine, maybe it's like an image thing or performance or publicity stunt to sell the album, or just his way of trying to get more power and influence now in the Christian world. But no, I think it's absolutely genuine. And I think Adam Tyson is absolutely genuine. I think Adam Tyson is wrong theologically, and I know he would think that I'm wrong and everything too, but I do believe that he actually believes everything he says, and he's not a grifter or a clout chaser. And it's just unfortunate that the path that Kanye is on right now, if he stays on this path, ends in Calvinism. Because I think Calvinism is ultimately a very dangerous and harmful version of spirituality. And I think it would ultimately be pretty harmful to his creative exploration as well. I wish there were some progressive Christians around Kanye to show him that there are other ways to talk about this stuff, because I'm sure that he is completely unaware of other kinds of Christians, because he also keeps recently talking about how he's a Christian innovator and he's going to innovate Christianity.
I'm thinking of something I want to say out loud. Christian innovator.
How do I bring it all to the church to be a Christian innovator?
Now we have Christian innovation.
Christianity is changing, and we are in the middle of a huge shift right now that will be able to be dissected 100 years from now. But that shift will leave conservative Christianity and Calvinism behind and embrace a more progressive and inclusive Christianity. And I wish Kanye was more aware of those innovations. I want to see Kanye actually grow, and his embrace of conservative Christianity and purity culture will be very harmful in the long run if he stays on it.
And know he was the Son of God. And know that he was Lord.
And I'm totally cool with including Christian themes in art. But when those themes are really just modern, Western, individualistic Christianity that is all about, I used to have problems, and then I found Jesus, and now I don't, I wouldn't classify that as historical Christian themes. And it's really just a deceitful commercialization of Christianity. So it makes sense that his fans don't like this new album. It reminded a lot of people of when Bob Dylan had an evangelical Christian phase from 1979 to 1981. He grew up in a Jewish household, and then one night, when he was feeling down and felt like he exhausted every method of escapism, he had this radical, mystical experience of the presence of Jesus, and chose the route of escapism through Christianity now, and chose to only make gospel albums from now on.
He stinks! Man, he's the worst. He's bad. He don't sing nothing like he used to. That's it.
$26 to go in there and see a show. And I could have went to church to see what I saw, you know? I mean, I don't know. I expected something different.
That's right. They want the old stuff. But the old stuff's not going to save them, and I'm not going to save them. Neither is anybody else they follow going to save them. They can boogie all night. It's not gonna work.
He released the gospel album Slow Train Coming in 1979, and then he followed it up with another gospel album in 1980 called Saved. But then in 1981, he released the album Shot of Love, which was a mix of gospel and secular songs, only for his 1983 album Infidels to be back to his usual secular themes, as he also returned to Judaism. And during Bob Dylan's Christian period, evangelicals also used his story as a prop to push their agenda, while all the fans talked about how mediocre the music had become, no matter how positive the message was. Because I believe everything must belong when it comes to good art. We need the sacred and the profane fully engaged with one another to expose that holy and dirty contradiction that exists within us all. The rapper Talib Kweli spoke about how this is what has always made Kanye's music so intriguing to everyone over the years, talking about how he's always used gospel sounds and samples in his music even though the lyrics weren't gospel themed.
That's been the whole duality of Kanye has made him a genius, is that you take these angelic melodic soundscapes and you're rapping about decadent shit, but we all appreciate it because we all have contradictions in our lives. So Kanye represents the contradiction that's in all of us. Right. He's been very good at that.
And historically, religious art and religious texts have always included those contradictions. To remove the profane and the worldly from religious art is to deny the humanity of Jesus when we talk about a God that incarnates fully into our humanity. The only reason you think cuss words aren't in the Bible is because they had different cuss words, and the Hebrew and Greek cuss words that are in there got translated to normal English words. And there are plenty of Bible stories that are definitely not safe for work and could never make it into VeggieTales uncensored. This sugar-coated, clean-cut, pristine, and sanitized Christian art that only celebrates the good and pure in life doesn't really look all that Christian to me once you've actually deeply studied all this stuff. So I feel like Kanye's new understanding of what makes art Christian is dangerously mistaken. On this album, he said, "I'm no longer cussing, and when I perform my old songs, I'm going to censor them live," and even suggested to Big Boy, kind of jokingly, that he wanted to go back and edit his old tracks the same way George Lucas went back and edited the Star Wars movies. And I feel like there's a possibility that he might not be joking, especially because he went back and famously edited the Life of Pablo tracks just a month after it was released, and now all those original tracks that were uploaded to those streaming platforms are replaced by the new ones. And he even made some headlines because he was saying that he wants his wife to dress modestly now, and he doesn't want his daughter to wear makeup anymore. And when he was making the album, he told everyone around him not to cuss around him, and he also told everyone working on the album to abstain from premarital sex while you're working on this.
The final track has this abrupt ending, as do a lot of the tracks on the record. I mean, it's no surprise that he told people to abstain from having sex when working on this album, as most of the tracks can never seem to properly finish.
And Kanye says he feels like he's following the footsteps of all these great artists throughout history who have made art for the church. But like I've been saying, all of this historical Christian art has always included the profane with the sacred. And that's what has made it great. A lot of the historical Christian art that we see today as pure and safe were actually really scandalous at the times that they were created, and the church responded by trying to censor them, seeing them as blasphemous. For example, Michelangelo's The Last Judgment, that was finished in 1541, depicts the second coming of Christ, and it was immediately criticized by the Catholic Church because, first of all, painting Jesus beardless, which was super scandalous at the time because it kind of made him look like a pagan god, but mostly because nearly every single one of the 300 figures in the painting were nude and mostly male. The church then started what they called the fig leaf campaign, where they painted bits of fabric and leaves over all the genitalia everywhere. And also in 1602, when Caravaggio painted Saint Matthew and the Angel, he was immediately met with controversy for, first of all, using a poor peasant as a model to paint a saint. But even more upsetting to critics was his painting of Saint Matthew with dirty feet. And the fact that he depicted this angel directing St. Matthew's handwriting made St. Matthew look illiterate. And we can't have that. The church rejected the painting and made Caravaggio paint a more glorifying image, which became the inspiration of St. Matthew. A more modern example of this kind of thing would be the 1987 photograph called Piss Christ by the Catholic photographer and artist Andres Serrano. It depicts a small plastic cross submerged in a glass tank of the artist's urine. Allegedly. And he created this not to be blasphemous, but to expose us to the fact that we have sanitized and commercialized the crucifixion so much that we have forgotten the absolute shock that the crucifixion is supposed to stir up within us. He said, what it symbolizes is the way Christ died. The blood came out of him, but so did the piss and the shit. Maybe if Piss Christ upsets you, it's because it gives some sense of what the crucifixion actually was like. I was born and raised a Catholic, and I've been a Christian all my life. I could go on and on about this subject of art for a really long time because I love it so much, but this video is already really long. Okay, here's another cool one. Okay, I think you get my point here. Kanye believes his art prior to this Jesus is King album was the devil's music, and now he is finally releasing his Christian art. But I believe that all of Kanye West's art before Jesus is King was actually more Christian. And the fact that this album is so pure and sanitized makes it the least Christian piece of art that he has ever created. In truly Christian art, everything belongs. The sacred and the profane, the dirt and the glory, the physical and the spiritual, because that holy contradiction is revealed in Jesus as an incarnation of God. That's the kind of Jesus that I find so much more fascinating than the Jesus of Kanye right now and the Jesus of modern white evangelicalism. So we'll see where Kanye ends up. He said he's going to put out another gospel album this December for Christmas called Jesus is Born. Maybe he'll go through what Bob Dylan went through and get to a point where he can see the spiritual value in all of art and then leave behind the pure gospel sound and return better than ever. That's my hope, at least. It's also my hope that not only will Kanye's mind expand to be exposed to progressive Christian ideas, but also expand enough to be exposed to leftist ideas as well. Because when he talks about corporations controlling people in interviews, he is so close to critiquing capitalism. But I don't think he's aware of critiques of capitalism because he only knows liberals as the far, far left. And when they don't have answers that satisfy him, he just falls back to conservative talking points. So hopefully he'll get there. If you're a praying person, pray for Kanye. If you hate Kanye, then you should know more than all of us that he needs all the prayer he can get, right? Thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video. This whole process of making this video, doing all the research, digging really deep, took a lot out of me, even almost got to a little bit of a breakdown in my own personal, emotional, and spiritual life. But we finally finished it, and now it's out there for all of you. So thank you, all of you out there who support me. I'd greatly appreciate it if you haven't already. Subscribe and watch some of my other videos on Christianity and leftist politics. And also follow me on Twitch, where I stream every single Tuesday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, twitch.tv/whoisdamon. And like I said, these videos take a lot of work, so I would greatly appreciate any support that you could throw my way. Go check out my Patreon, patreon.com/Damon Garcia. Shout out to all my patrons already there who support me to make these types of videos. Shout out Blake the Bold, Ranger Jenny, Refined Your Scene, James Finlay, New Transcendentalist, Kristen Mouse, Mike Totman, Peter John Blake, Mimi McGann, Callie, Rob Hutton, Jack, Theory Plebe, Jacob McCarthy, Mike Lodato, Frank Morales, Socialist Sangha, They Were Monsters, and Julianne King. Thank you so much. Appreciate all of you. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.